Karoline Leavitt is quickly becoming a force to be reckoned with, and whether you're a political junkie or just someone who keeps an eye on the headlines, you've probably noticed her steady rise within the political landscape. Though currently associated with the Democratic Party by some in commentary, it's clear her values and vocal presence lean towards supporting the conservative base, and that's part of what's igniting the buzz around her name. She's been at the center of several fiery exchanges lately, and each time, she doesn't just respond, she dominates. One such moment came when she responded to Jasmine Crockett, who had previously made the sweeping and dismissive claim that Trump supporters were mentally ill. Karoline didn't mince words. She pointed out that Crockett's remark was not only deeply offensive, but it also insulted millions of Americans, roughly 80 million, in fact, who voted for Donald Trump. Leavitt made it clear that these voters are the backbone of the country: business owners, nurses, teachers, law enforcement officers, everyday citizens from Middle America who felt increasingly unheard and disrespected by the political elite. She even suggested that if Jasmine ever attended a Trump rally, she might gain a better understanding of who these people are and what they stand for. It's not just partisan mudslinging, it's a matter of principle, of not reducing political opposition to a mental health diagnosis. What Karoline offered was not just a rebuttal but a full-scale dismantling of a tired narrative, one that seeks to stigmatize rather than understand or engage. This kind of rhetoric, as she noted, has a long precedent. It echoes Hillary Clinton's infamous basket of deplorables moment and President Biden's equally divisive comments about Trump supporters. These aren't minor gaffes, they reflect a broader and growing comfort within certain circles of Democratic leadership to vilify large swaths of the American populace. And rather than being held accountable, these statements are now brushed off as political theater, yet they leave real scars. Next, we saw Karoline in action again, this time during a tense exchange involving Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell. In a powerful takedown, Karoline didn't come empty-handed, she brought the receipts. Armed with economic charts and a direct quote from President Trump, she confronted Powell's decisions on interest rates and accused him of being out of step with economic reality. Trump's message to Powell was blunt: the high rates were costing the U.S. economy dearly, with hundreds of billions lost and no real inflation to justify the monetary tightening. Karoline backed this up with a global comparison, showing how interest rates in other strong economies were lower, suggesting Powell's approach was not only outdated but actively harmful. And she wasn't alone in this sentiment. Criticism of Powell has been building, especially among those who believe his resistance to lower rates is politically motivated or rooted in outdated economic orthodoxy. But Leavitt made the case with sharp clarity, reminding everyone that Trump's economic track record in his first term was strong, and that same momentum could continue, if not for bureaucratic resistance. From there, she pivoted to a brewing media controversy. A CNN journalist had run with reports based on so-called leaked intelligence regarding U.S. strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities. The DIA had reportedly labeled the intel as low confidence, yet CNN presented it as if it were definitive. Karoline wasn't having it. She pointed out that such leaks are often incomplete, lacking proper context, and when taken at face value, they can create a dangerously misleading narrative. More importantly, she drew attention to the journalist involved, Natasha Bertrand, who has a track record of questionable reporting. Bertrand was one of the central figures pushing the narrative that the Hunter Biden laptop story was Russian disinformation, a claim later debunked and now widely acknowledged as false. Leavitt didn't hold back, saying flat out that Bertrand was being used by political operatives to spread misinformation under the guise of journalism. It wasn't just a jab at one reporter, it was a scathing indictment of an entire media ecosystem more concerned with narratives than facts. She called for accountability, not just for the leaker but also for those in the media who knowingly propagate misleading information. That exchange was followed by yet another firestorm, this time involving Karine Jean-Pierre, the former White House press secretary. Jean-Pierre had compared recent changes in press access to policies seen in North Korea, a hyperbolic and, according to Karoline, hypocritical claim. Leavitt reminded the press that during Jean-Pierre's tenure, over 440 journalists lost access to the White House press pool, and questions were often required to be submitted in advance, effectively neutering the spontaneous, challenging nature of real press briefings. Leavitt flipped the narrative on its head, saying that under the current administration, transparency and openness were being restored. President Trump, she argued, has taken far more questions than his predecessor, and that commitment to engagement would only continue. The irony, she noted, is that those decrying censorship were often the very ones enforcing it when they held power. The double standards are glaring, and Karoline wasn't about to let them go unchallenged. Then came another moment that demanded a response: French President Emmanuel Macron's comments at a UN conference, where he criticized tariffs imposed by powerful countries, calling them a form of economic blackmail. Though Macron didn't name the US directly, the implication was clear. But Karoline swiftly dismissed his characterization, explaining that tariffs under President Trump were not about blackmail, they were about restoring fairness, rebuilding America's industrial base, and pushing back against decades of economic policies that favored multinational interests over domestic workers. She noted that manufacturing was once the heartbeat of the American economy and that Trump's use of tariffs was designed to bring that strength back. Leavitt didn't shy away from calling out the hypocrisy, pointing out that France and the EU have used tariffs themselves, often to the detriment of developing nations, and yet somehow they get a pass while the US gets lectured. In a biting closing remark, she said Trump was back in town and ready to do what's right for the American people, whether global elites liked it or not. Karoline's message throughout these encounters was consistent: facts matter, the American people deserve respect, and leaders must be held to account, whether they're journalists, bureaucrats, or foreign dignitaries. Her approach combines sharp intellect with a no-nonsense style that has clearly struck a chord with many voters. She doesn't just respond to criticism, she dismantles it with data, context, and moral clarity. Whether addressing media bias, economic policy, or foreign diplomacy, Leavitt shows that she's not afraid to challenge entrenched power and call out hypocrisy where she sees it. That's what makes her so compelling to watch and why her rise seems more like a matter of destiny than chance. It's not just that she's outspoken, it's that she's consistently grounded in principle and unafraid to say the uncomfortable truths others tiptoe around.
From defending Trump supporters against cheap shots, to standing up to flawed economic reasoning, to demanding integrity in journalism, Karoline is carving out a space where facts, patriotism, and common sense still hold value. In an age where so much of politics is reduced to sound bites and spectacle, she's offering substance, wrapped in sharp rhetoric and fearless delivery. And while critics may continue to take shots, it's increasingly clear that she's not going anywhere. If anything, her momentum is just beginning. Karoline Leavitt continues to prove she's not just a rising star, she's a political force who refuses to play by the old rules. In a recent exchange that left Washington buzzing, Karoline responded to accusations from a panel on MSNBC who labeled her rhetoric dangerous and divisive. Without missing a beat, she fired back, stating that what's truly dangerous is a media class that routinely silences opposing voices and gaslights half the country for daring to think differently. They call it misinformation anytime it comes from someone on the right, she said. But when they get it wrong, it's just a mistake. That's not journalism. That's narrative control. Leavitt didn't just stop there. She brought receipts, video clips, quotes, and polling data, showing how trust in the media has cratered in recent years, with more Americans believing they're being manipulated rather than informed. She connected the dots between that distrust and the rise of populist movements, arguing that people are tired of being ignored and talked down to. You want to know why Trump won? Why he might win again? It's because he listens. He fights. And he doesn't apologize for putting America first. She called out the same elite institutions that once ridiculed Trump's border wall but now quietly support border security measures, as the immigration crisis grows too big to spin away. When asked if she believed her rhetoric could fuel polarization, Karoline didn't flinch. We already live in a polarized country, she said. But the left believes unity means silence. I'm not going to sit quietly while they try to rewrite the Constitution through executive orders and activist courts. One of the most powerful moments came when she addressed younger voters. Don't let anyone shame you for loving your country, she said directly into the camera. You don't have to be ashamed to be a patriot. You don't have to agree with every policy to believe America is worth fighting for. The clip went viral, racking up millions of views in hours. Across social media, supporters and critics alike had to admit, Karoline knows how to command a room. While the mainstream press continues to downplay her influence, grassroots movements across the country are rallying behind her message of bold truth-telling and unapologetic America First values. Whether she's calling out hypocrisy from media insiders, challenging bureaucratic power plays, or defending ordinary Americans from elitist sneers, Karoline Leavitt is proving she's not just in the conversation, she's shaping it. And if this past year is any indication, her political journey is just getting started.